Well, welcome back to Next Day Notes, even though it's not the next fucking day. In my garage, um, sitting in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the game, man. Just trying to process it. And I spoke to Brandon of the Listen Up podcast. If you want a good podcast to follow Listen Up podcast on Twitter, on YouTube. Some folks like to say they're negative, but they're really not. They're realistic takes. They criticize this coaching staff like you'd criticize Willie or criticize Jimbo when we weren't playing for Natties at the end of his tenure. But anyways, trying to process this game, man, and it's always easy to point the blame at one thing, like anything in life. It's convenient if you can point it at one thing. And I guess if I'm trying to point at that one thing in this game, I mean, I don't know. It's nuanced because I think expectations matter. Like if you wanted to really point at one thing and not consider expectations, you'd say, well, that very good, top 5 Clemson defense and Brent Venables put the clamps on our offense, on our one-dimensional offense, shut Jordan down. Jordan also looked a little hesitant to do what he normally does, which is, hey, if it's not there, take off. He seemed a little hesitant to take off. But that could be the ultimate thing that you could point at if you weren't thinking of expectations. And why do I say that? Because I expected our offense to get slowed down, and it did. I think we only finished with like 260 yards or something like that. Not very good. Yards per play weren't very good. Just a pretty not good performance because a very good defense shut us down. But if you consider expectations, I would point the finger at the defense, right? And I know there's moments in the game where players were in position, but, maybe missed a tackle or didn't make a play. But still, this Clemson offense is a shell of its former self. It's been absolutely dreadful. And they finished the night with 377 yards, which generally that's not a lot, but for this offense it is. It's their third highest output of the year. The only teams to allow more versus Clemson has been South Carolina State in Boston College's defense, which is absolutely dreadful, and they got a lot of injured players. In the first half, Clemson was averaging about 7 yards per play. 7 yards per play from that pathetic offense. Now, the second half, our D tightened up a little bit. There was less, cutback lanes for Shipley to go through. Seemed to tighten some gaps and whatnot. Only allowed 7 in the second half. But still, how often did we genuinely stop them? There was some times where we had the bend but don't break, held them to a field goal attempt. But I mean, the field goal attempt's not technically a stop. To me, a stop is you get them to punt the fucking ball, or they turn it over on downs. They how many times they punt the ball? A few? 3? Not many. So they had the 3 missed field goals. I mean, this isn't even a ball game if he makes 2 of those. It's the game. It felt like the score was always close, but it felt like I'll use a baseball analogy. It felt like watching my Cubs team when they have a pathetic offense and the team, and they're only losing by 1, but it feels like 10 because the bats can't get it going. Not versus a team that has, superior defense and pitching. And that's what it felt like. Even though we were close, it just seemed like a struggle. Not seemed like it was a really really big struggle to, get anything going offensively. And you can criticize calls and stuff like that throughout the game. You can do that every game. But after a while, it got to the point where I really wasn't criticizing the offensive staff. I was kind of just accepting the reality of the fact that they have much more talent on D than we have on O, and we're one-dimensional. It is what it is. Going into the game, I thought we needed 3 scores to win on offense. We only got 2, right? But again, it's not a travesty for this Clemson D to shut you down, especially at home in Death Valley. But again, what what I would point at that irked me the most was our defense. Like, leave it up to Fuller to be on par with, South Carolina State and Boston College's defense. Mind you, versus South Carolina State, Clemson had like 500 yards or something. I think versus Boston College, they had over 400. But regardless, all the other games you look at, I mean, 2 or 3 games where they're held under 300 yards. Of course, Georgia's elite defense only held to 180. I'm not saying we should do anything like that. But it's like, man, if our defense held Clemson to like their normal shitty offensive game, by that I mean they score less than 20. I think they finished the game averaging about 5.2 yards per play, which I think, without looking, would probably be one of their better outputs of the season. Generally speaking, 5.2 yards per play isn't great nationally, but that would probably be, they've played 8 games now. I guess that would be one of their top 3 performances as far as yards per play go. So we already knew Fuller was garbage, and he proved it once again. And, like I said, because how many times do we get genuine stops? I mean, even our turnovers, which, yes, give our defense credit for stripping a ball, for strip sacking their quarterback and turning it into points, right? They get credit for the strip and everything. But as we know, there is some luck in turnovers. And on both of those fumbles that we caused, you did have to have some luck because the ball literally had to bounce your way. When Jermaine stripped it, it was a very fortuitous bounce for it to go right in front of him to get it and go. I mean, credit to him. Great play, right? Or when we stripped them, their running back or whoever it was, near midfield. Again, need a fortuitous bounce for us to recover that, right? So let's say one of those bounces don't go our way, one less turnover. Let's say they just make 2 of those field goals that were very makeable instead of missing all 3. It's not really much of a game. They're up by 2 scores for the majority of the game, which feels like 4 scores because our offense can't do anything against their elite defense. So that's a really long-winded way of saying, if I was going to point my finger at one thing that lost us this game, and I considered expectations, try to make it a nuanced answer based on those expectations, it would be fuck Fuller. Like I said, I don't want to say our defense played poorly. Like, generally, they did not. But in the context of facing a horrible, an absolutely horrible Clemson offense, the defense didn't play well on the whole when you actually look at the numbers. They played okay. They played much better in the second half. But on the whole, they played right? Like, and I guess, again, this game's so hard to process. I spoke about this on that Listen Up podcast as well. Like, did this feel like a step forward, a step back? And I was like, well, it doesn't feel like a step back. Like, you can't say that. Like, the only way this game feels like a step back is if Clemson blew you out. And fuck the 10-point victory. That was a last-second scoop and score. This was a 24-20 game for all intents and purposes. Right, so a step back would have only occurred if you got blown out. And that didn't happen. It was a game from start to finish. So from that respect, it feels like a step forward, but then not really, because there were so many opportunities within the game for you to win it that it kind of feels just like you held serve. Like you shot par for this game, right? You didn't take a step backwards. You didn't necessarily take a huge leap forward. Maybe if I was being optimistic, I'd say maybe you made a small incremental step forward. Because regardless of how shitty Clemson's offense has been all year, just 3 or 4 weeks ago, I would have said Clemson, in spite of that shitty offense, would still beat us by like 20, and it wouldn't be much of a game in the second half. Because that's how poorly we were playing the first month of the year. So our play has improved, obviously. And this game reflected that a little bit, right? But it's still just like, find a way to win one of these close games. Like, I don't think this changes the overall outlook of the program. A close loss to Clemson at Clemson, I mean, if anything, you can spin that on the recruiting trail. But boy, a win certainly would have put an exclamation point on, hey, the turnaround has begun. It's still going to take a hot minute, but it's truly begun. We just won in Death Valley. We stopped their home winning streak. We stopped the streak they had against us. You know, hey, recruits, come on down. You know, again, this game still feels like it's a tiny step in the direction, but it's still like, God, there were so many fucking moments in that game. You had an opportunity, right? I mean, there was at times it felt like, I get it that, you know, they were so good at containing our run, we felt like maybe we had to pass a little more. Not that we passed a dick ton, but it felt like we maybe went away from that a little bit. And I think, I think that's partly because Clemson's ridiculously good defense was dictating terms. But, I mean, Travis just didn't look the same. And, again, part of that is Clemson's D, but there were times when he would have a good, 3 seconds of a pocket, which is really good for our offensive line against Clemson's D. And, okay, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. Okay, you didn't throw. We're normally used to seeing Travis take off at that point. And he seemed like he did less of that. I mean, what was his longest scramble or run of the day? It couldn't have been more than 10 yards. And again, part of that you give credit to Venables, but another part, it just seemed like Travis was hesitant. He didn't have that quick, all right, 1, 2 reads, all right, I'm fucking gone. It was 3 seconds, oh shit, I'm going to try and buy time. Fuck that, just go. Now, I was talking about this on that other pod as well. It's likely that when he looked up, he didn't see these big gaping holes in running lanes that he saw versus some other teams, right? The windows were smaller to run through. So, okay, fine. Maybe you're not going to break and embarrass Clemson's defense with a 30-yard scramble, but there's nothing wrong with taking off and getting a 4 or 5-yard scramble. Those could, I'd have to, go and review the film, or someone would have to, and look at the all 22s. But I would guess if on probably maybe 3 to 4 of those plays where he kind of just had 2 or 3 seconds and didn't take off and just kind of held the ball and danced around in the pocket, there were probably some opportunities where, the old Travis, he would just taken off, he might have got some positive yardage. So, I mean, that really hurt this offense. It hurts any offense, but that really hurt this offense, especially in the second half when we were getting those second and 13s because of a TFL. Or, a false start, the 1st and 15, like, that's already tough. And it almost killed the drive, versus a defense like Clemson's. It's like, once it turned into, 1st, 2nd, and 15, it was like, that's pretty much a wrap. Like, maybe against North Carolina, or Syracuse, of course, UMass. All right, you can stub your toe and still overcome it because those teams aren't Clemson's defense. But once we got into the situations, it was like, fuck. I mean, we scored 0 points in the second half. Again, I thought we needed to score 3 times on offense to win. Well, we scored twice. Had we scored 3, obviously, mathematical math, we would have won. Thanks to Jermaine Johnson's scoop and score. But I'm still processing that. Again, I'm not even mad. It's just like, fuck, man, I'm just tired of these losses. Like, just imagine, like, 4-4 isn't great, but it would feel so much better. You'd have the same record as Miami and Florida. You could sell the Clemson win on the recruiting trail. Now you just have to win 2 out of your last 4 to become 6-6 and bowl eligible. Now you essentially got to win 3 straight, because I highly doubt you're winning in Gainesville. As maybe by that time, Florida has given up. Maybe. But you look at Florida's advanced metrics, they're a much better team than their 4-4 record. What's killed them, beyond the LSU run defense they had that game, is their turnovers. Like, their quarterbacks have been turnover machines. But even today, I didn't watch every minute of the game, and I looked at the stats. I believe Florida had 1 more offensive yard than Georgia. But The how and where, how and the positions on the field where Florida's turnovers occurred were backbreakers. Pick six, other turnovers gave Georgia just a tiny, field to go ahead and score. And then again, you look at the season metrics on Florida. Like I think S&P Plus had them as a top 10 team going in this game. And, take that with a grain of salt. Not every stat's perfect. But again, long-winded way of me saying if Florida's motivated for that rivalry game, if they haven't quit, I just don't see how we win that. We could beat NC State next week. Definitely possible at home. BC they're just ravaged with injuries and their defense is absolutely atrocious. I think we should win that game. And then Miami's been playing pretty good this last couple weeks. Fucking roller coaster of a season for them. They're 4-4 now, and last couple weeks have been decent wins. So, it's at FSU, but I would say they're probably a favorite in the game. It's probably a coin flip game. It's winnable, but it's going to be tough. Anyway, so I'm running here 15 minutes, man. I don't know how to process. I think the optimist in me does want to say it feels like it's another tiny step, right? If you like cliches, if you like Bobby Bowden cliches, when you're rebuilding a program, again, this isn't to excuse the whole coaching staff. There's some guys that need to kick rocks, most notably Fuller and the linebackers coach Marv, completely ass. But Bowden's cliche that, people tweet out all the time, which was, when rebuilding a program, first you lose big. Then you lose close. Then you win close. Then you win big, right? Again, a few weeks ago, in spite of Clemson's offense being pathetic a few weeks ago, we were absolutely dreadful. And I would have predicted we would have lost by 20, right? So in that respect, the fact that it was a game from start to finish, yeah. And again, as someone noted on Twitter that I follow, it's okay to acknowledge tiny steps of improvement without celebrating a moral victory, because moral victories aren't a thing. But it's okay to acknowledge small steps of growth. And I guess the optimist in me would say this is a tiny step. Doesn't mean this coaching staff is, even in this game particularly, is bereft of criticism. I still have the energy for the same criticism. This just felt like a game that eventually it came down to, we're not moving a ball against Venables in that D. It is what it fucking is. That was my overriding feeling. Again, there were other things, other reasons we lost, but that's why I wasn't mad. I'm like, it just is what it is. We don't have, yeah, but whatever. All right, till next time. I'm out.